afternoon, Mama Moshe. And Mama Moshe, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor and introduce our guest for today.
Well, it's my divine pleasure.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's my divine pleasure to introduce Mama Kitty. I call her Mama Kitty. She's Miss Kitty K. Green. She is the proud owner of the Gullah-N-Geechie Mahn tours here at St. Helens Island in South Carolina. So we're going to have her present here to step back in time as we enjoy her historical research in the culture that she is rooted in. We're going to take that journey through the St. Helens Island, surrounded by seas. We're going to listen to her narration by her enthusiasm, her experience, her research, her divine feminine energy, the power of which she stands in. She's also an activist. She is very known and loved here in the community. And with that, I'm complete, and I hand you the mic, Mama Kitty.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is such a great pleasure to be talking with you this afternoon. And I'm excited about this because I'm finding after over 31 years of doing Gullah that there are more and more African Americans who are traveling to the low country and coming into the area to learn more about who they are and the imprint of Africanisms that was not only left in these sea islands, but also operate in other areas. I often tell people that Gullah is not geography. As we moved from place to place, and particularly out of the South, we took our cultures with us and left imprints in those areas. And so it's a wonderful thing today to see what Mr. Obama did with the reconstruction, naming this area very significant for the movement of reconstruction in our history, and to look at those African Americans who are descendants of those slaves grabbing hold to the information and celebrating who they are today because more and more of this information is being spread across the nation.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The term Gullah and Geechee, where does that term come from? And how does it relate to the people who are still there today? And what have they been some of the things that our ancestors, whose legacy and history we are celebrating in the Gullah-Geechee Islands now? And I'm gonna encourage people to come down and take your tour. You're in Beaufort, aren't you?
I'm actually on St. Helena.
Oh, you're in St. Helens.
I'm on St. Helena. I am married to one of those descendants of the Gullah-N-Geechee people. And so I've been here over 40 years, going on 50 years now. And uh, my husband's mother and father both were born on St. Helena's Island. So we are all Geechee people here on this island. I will tell you that St. Helena is extremely important to American history as we look at the beginning of the Civil War and the imprint of those Africans after that war. Well, actually, in the beginning of the war, these people got their freedoms first and were able to continue living almost independent until 1927, when finally there was a bridge that connected St. Helena to what they actually call the mainland, but it's still an island, which is Port Royal Island. And So they were able to hold on to traditions, and that's why we can celebrate Africanisms today, is because they were able to hold on to those things that we brought with us out of the continent of Africa. Now, I'm going to answer your question about where does the word Gullah and Geechee comes from. The word Gullah is a corruptness of the word Angola. But when we look at the economic periods of the rice industries, I will tell you that there was a tribe that was called the Golas, and they came out of that particular area of Angola. The word Geechee is a corruptness of the word Kisi, and Kisi was a Creole culture, but they were the Kisi people, and they were also rice producers. The word Kisi or Geechee is also a word out of the Creole language, and I'm spelling that Krio, which was a word that was demeaning. So if you were down in Louisiana and some areas of the South, if you were to call people a Geechee, then you would have gotten in a fight because you were calling them ignorant and backwards, and it was demeaning. But so it's a word out of the Creole language, and it's also a word that describes a particular rice producing tribe that was brought here because of that industry. So if you would call a lot of South Carolina Geechees or Gullahs, they're just thinking you call them a rice eater because of that influence of economics that was generated in the Carolinas.
Oh, that's very interesting. Because they grew a lot of rice in South
Yeah,
Carolina. Matter of fact, South Carolina is one of the most important states when it comes to slavery because that was a port that most of African slaves came into.
that's
Uh,
right.
South Carolina. South Carolina at one time had more Africans than whites, actually.
Well,
I'm Go ahead.
I was going to tell you that the South Carolina slaveholders, what we call them, are the power barons. They are the 1%ers. You're only talking about 10 to 15 families, but they brought 3/4 of all Africans into this continent was controlled by the South Carolina slaveholders. They held anywhere from 10 to 15 plantations from North Carolina all the way down into Florida, just above Jacksonville. So when we look at those particular major economic periods, which of course would be indigo, rice, the Sea Island cotton, they were the ones who generated through slavery, of course, the slave labor generated the majority of the economics. So when we look at the beginning of the Civil War, on these islands, and I'm talking about Hilton Head, Defusky, Port Royal Island, St. Helena. Then what I will tell you is that the cotton was the economics, and it was rocking and rolling. So when the Northern troops come in and they're able to quickly, within hours, confiscate all those islands that was producing that Sea Island cotton. At that time, by 1861, many of the Africans were able to get not only land, but get their freedom. And so that was significant. And then when you look at the isolation after the Civil War, where they're living independently, then you see that they're able to hold on to traditions, and that's why you see these traditions still operating in these islands today, particularly St. Helena. Um, you mentioned about land ownership. Well, on this island, when I moved here with my husband in the early 70s, 90% of this island was still owned by African Americans who were descendants, the majority of them from those original slaves. So when I got here, my husband and I did not have to buy land. We were just given land by the elders, and at that time it was my husband's grandmother.
Oh, that is so fantastic,
Yes,
because that would have been an African tradition in
yes,
terms of nobody being able to own the land actually, but everybody, the land belonged to everybody. And
that's right.
so you could be assigned an allotment of land for 100 years or whatever, depending on how big your family was and so forth. But to hear that most of the Gullah-Geechies were from Angola, that is really a significant statement, because most of us don't know where Angola is in Africa. We don't know what tribes or what religions or any of that our ancestors actually come out of and come from. And we don't know the war that Angola put up for its independence. I'm talking about lately now. You're saying that up until 1970, the Gullah Islands was still owned 90% owned by black folk.
Well, I'm specifically talking about St. Helena. If you look at Hilton Head, in the 70s, there was that movement, really in the 60s. A lot of land on Hilton Head and places like that was taken by the descendants of the Europeans. So those are developed islands. But one of the positions that I held here in the county, that I was on the Economic Development Board and the Chamber of Commerce, and a whole lot of boards and committees that was important. And on St. Helena, even today, we have a committee that was put together and given power by the county. And African Americans, we were able to make some decisions about development, how it can be, how it will affect the local population, which was African American, the kinds of industries that we wanted on the island. And that has had an important move for us to hold on to traditions. The other thing is that we could prove that Gullah was significant for the state, that talking about history and culture was a great economic engine. And therefore, we've seen a shift in how the state markets Gullah and the monies that they put in it to encourage Africanisms to be able to thrive here in the Sea Island. So a lot of people are coming into the area because of the Gullah culture, because we have held on to traditions, and more African Americans are aware of the imprint from the continent, because you've got languages, you've got languages that have loan words that come from African languages, and we speak them every day and don't realize that they're African words. But the women were the nurturers of the slaveholders' children. So who do you learn from first is that mother who, or that person is suckling you. So we say okay. We say okay every day. Okay, I'll do it, right? Okay is an African word. My grandchildren, my great grandchildren call me Nana. Nana is an African word. And we can just go on and on and on about the imprint of language. And of course, I'm in my late 70s. And so, in our schools, we weren't taught that Africans had languages or written languages, but we did. And we know more about who we are as a people. The other thing that's extremely important for us as Africans in America is that Gullah is the matriarchal culture. So the imprint and the empowerment of women is extremely important, because the woman is the first teacher. And so you see all of that evolving and continuing in the islands like this. This is a great place to live. I love it here, and I honor my husband. Well, honored my grandmother. I love my grandmother. Boy, I talk about her. Hardly a day go by that I don't talk about my grandmother. But I remember my husband's grandmother who gave us the land. She was in her late 80s when she was retired out, and she did not like it, but she made sure every year the taxes was paid. She made sure that her grandchildren, she trusted me, so she allowed me to go through her paperwork. Now you know you really trust it if you go through your grandparents stuff, and she allowed me to go through all her paperwork, and I found that she had hospitalization on my husband, and we were in our early or late 20s when we moved here, but she was taking care of all her grandsons, and she knew where she was going to let them live when they moved here, and she was just really a precious thing. And so every time I would come to visit her, she would say, "Can't you find me a job?" And she was in her late 80s, but she was a progressive woman who looked out for the future of her grandchildren. And I just honor her with such great joy because of the imprint that she left behind. It's something. Every time I walk my grounds, I think about Grandma Nellie. So Gullah is so significant, and I often say as an educator, integration is good, but integration took away a lot of those Africanisms that we still find operating here on St. Helena's Island.
Mama Kitty, can
Yes.
you can you see me and hear me? Moshe, um, I've lost the image on this end. Can you bring it back?
Oh, wow. I can see you. I can see all three of us.
Yes.
Um,
Okay, well that's important, and I can just ask the questions. I'll just keep going the way we're going. Um,
I
Go ahead.
do.
No,
I
I
don't
was
know what. Do you see yourself now?
no, not at all.
Wow. Um, because I'm on my phone, so I can't. Let me see if I
Okay.
can see the layout.
Let me just ask Mama Kitty to keep talking. I went to the independence celebration, liberation of Namibia, and yeah, everybody was there. Jesse Jackson was there. Nelson Mandela was there. Winnie Mandela was there. But that independence came about through the war of Cuba, through the entrance through Cuba getting involved in the war that was taking place with Angola and South Africa. And it was because Cuban soldiers that really beat the whites in Angola. I mean, really beat them to their knees. Uh, that Namibia was given liberation. The reason I was bringing this up was because uh, the Angolans really put up a hell of a fight, and Africans all over put up a, a terrific fight against Europeans and against their enslavement in the first place. And some of those same Angolans that end up on the island end up in South Carolina also fought. We're going to be doing a series of talks on that, um, and on uh, they are really being Africans really being the people who made America, who built America, not only America, but Europe. And we've been involved in every aspect of this country's development. And so those islands, which at one time were practically all black, but I wanted you to tell us a little bit about the history. I don't know whether it was Sherman that 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 made sure that blacks would, because we didn't get the 40 acres of mule, but there was land. Those islands were appropriated to to black people, and I wanted you to give us an insight, as much as you know, as to how that came about.
I originally talked about the South Carolina slaveholders were the power barons. So when the North comes in, the Battle of Port Royal, which takes place in the beginning of the Civil War, war starts in April of 1861. And within hours, the North was able to shoot down the guns and able to come onto the land around the Port Royal Sound, which would be Hilton Head, Port Royal Island. Beaufort is on Port Royal Island, St. Helena, uh, and they were able to confiscate these islands immediately. Now, when we look at that time frame and we look at the numbers of Africans, just on St. Helena alone, there was over 10,000 Africans, less than 300 whites within those families, 10 to 15 families, controlled this whole region. The one thing that was of value was those Africans with their skills. And so from that, the Union Navy did not want to lose the workforce. So when the Freedmen's Bureau comes in, they encourage that those Africans be given their freedom and land ownership. Now we got that three different ways. One is through tax sales. If those slave masters had made it back over here from Charleston, because a lot of them fled to Charleston, we didn't get Charleston to the end of the Civil War, but in the beginning they got this area. And so if you successfully farmed the land for 2 years, you were awarded that land. Then the Freedmen Bureau also began to pay Africans wages. And at tax time, because those Europeans did not come back to pay their taxes, because they knew they would have been tried for treason, then those Africans could bid on those lands. And because they were being paid menial wages, they would pool their resources. The third way is the 40 acres and the mule, Sherman's Field Order number 15. Now, there is no record of the mule being given, but there are records that, and you can find them with the information from the Freedmen's Bureau, because they still have that in archives, that we were given, able to get anywhere from 10, 20, 30, 40 acres of land from that. But it wasn't done out of humanity. It was done out of the issue of economics. When the South separated from the North, it crippled the economy. And in order to continue the war effort, cotton was king, cotton was it. And just having the kind of labor force it had, that was extremely significant for the North to continue. Plus the fact that they got that their intent was to cut off the head of the movement within the South, and that was your South Carolina slaveholders, and the empowerment through economics that they had gained. And we're right here at Beaufort. Beaufort is the second oldest city to Charleston. So the mines that controlled the industries were between Beaufort and Charleston, and the efforts of the war. Even when we look at secession, over in Beaufort, they still have the secession house where they met upon that eve and decided that they were coming out of the Union itself. So That's how we got land, and it lasted a while. Now, Mr. Obama, before he left office, designated this reconstruction areas, and of course, it would be. There was some controversy over whether St. Helena would be a part of it because those Africans got their land so early that they felt like they were not the prime example, that they were the exception of the movement of reconstruction, but eventually you'll see that it became extremely important to the efforts. So today, even though uh, many of us still own land on St. Helena, there is still a movement of loss of land. I would say even though gentrification is going on, when we look at the records today, they've lumped uh, uh, Fripp Island and all these little Berry Islands in the numbers with St. Helena, and those islands have more whites on them, and they're the developed island. And so, but they're up under the 29920 code, and so it makes it look like there's more whites than there are blacks, but not so on St. Helena. I can take you all around the island, you won't see nothing but us. As we say in Gullah, we peoples.
Uh, okay. Now, politics
Yeah, baby.
establishes really who controls what,
Yes,
and
sir.
especially locally. But are there enough blacks in South Carolina? I thought the number was somewhere around 37% of the voting public in South Carolina were black. Am I right?
That's what they say. uh, I think that is the numbers are skewed a little bit, just basically by moving about South Carolina. I think they misrepresent our numbers. But I have often told my children and a lot of young people, if you don't sit at the table, you don't get to determine what's going to be served. And so there is a movement in Carolina, particularly on St. Helena and in the area, of more young people getting involved in the political arena. You know, there is so many battles here in South Carolina with education, public education, who is teaching our children. And just on St. Helena today, there's several African American groups that are fighting to have their own charter school so that they would be the ones determining what our children learn. And but it's all about politics, and we see some movement where we have these committees that I've been on have been extremely effectual when it comes to people recognizing how important it is to hold on to land. I think back in the 70s, the elders were so comfortable in what they were doing because they were involved in agriculture, they were doing truck farming, all those things, so progressive. And as young people moved out and got their education, because that was important to the elders to be able to educate their children, many of them didn't want to come back. So we've seen a decline in those kind of things we had over the years. And now there's a movement that young people are coming back into the area and getting involved because they understand now, just from publications outside the community, that they were unique, that everybody didn't get land when the Civil War was over, and how fortunate they were, and that it was okay to be a farmer because they had land attached to the term Gullah and Geechee. Prior to that, they were taught that it was something demeaning and not important to be. And now we see all these young people who are educated young people involved in politics, particularly on St. Helena.
That is wonderful. Because actually, the only way black people will get power is that they get it politically, they can take it because they have the numbers. If you have 37%, you can.
Excuse me, Baba. Excuse me.
uh
I need for you to tilt your camera up because all we can see is your chest.
Oh my goodness. What
There
about
you go. Bring it down. Bring it up a little more. Yeah, that's better.
I
Thank
feel
you.
I'm sure I'm glad you told me. 'Cause I'm gonna be a fat old man. Well,
Okay,
let me
continue.
let me get back to what we need to do. And I'm sure, Mama Kitty, that you agree with me. Our power will be to take the political arena, and we
Right.
have the numbers. I mean, we need black governors, we need
Yeah.
black senators, those positions that can determine what will happen with the land, with the militia, talking about the um, state police, because if you are the governor, you influence all of those areas of
Yes.
defense and protection. And even on the local level, if you control the towns, you can control who's the sheriff, who's going to be the police, and what school system. So politics is critically important. And the governor is kind of like the president of the
Sure is.
state. I mean, once you have the president of the nation, the president of the state is next to him. So black people can really take South Carolina if we organize to take it and realize that we can take it. And we are good people. I mean, we have criminals in our race just like everybody else. But black people on the whole are some God fearing people. I
Yeah, they
mean,
are.
if you watch the awards, what's some awards just happened? Uh, but most of the time, our sisters might come out on the stage with they dress all up to their hips and everything. But the first thing come out of their mouth is, "I thank God."
Yeah, that's right.
you
Yes.
know, and so even there's something inside of us that makes us want to serve the Creator. And the same thing would be in Africa. We are a God fearing people. Um, and I think that will go a long ways right now because it's our time. Uh, Astrologically, it's our time. And our ancestors knew this and wrote it in stone. And you
That's
can
right.
find it in the temples of Egypt and all over. So I'm really just happy to talk with you, Mama Kitty. Uh, and I want to say to you, you are really on the right track. And I just pray that you to give you the strength to continue. And I'm from South Carolina. I'm from right there in Lancaster.
All
Uh,
right now.
and I'm
Carolina
coming home.
boy.
Huh?
I said, you a Carolina boy.
Yeah, I'm a South Carolina. I'm right there in Lancaster, right on the line.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get back there. I want to spend these last days at home. And so I'll keep in contact with y'all. Um, and whatever I can do to help, I'll be glad to do it. Uh, Mama Moshe,
Yes.
I want to thank you for this interview. It's um, it's even more powerful getting me to come home. so, so I'm glad you stumbled on this island and Sister Kitty and what's going on. Uh, and I thank
Yeah, well, this is the result. This is a a relationship of being obedient to the divine spirit. Because when I first initially came to South Carolina, I came in here specifically to be of service to one family. And when the spirit allowed me to be in the midst of another young lady, and we were out, and she decided she wanted to stop at this hair locking business in Braden, and we went in to visit the young lady, and here comes Mama Kitty walks in, and her daughter eventually walked in with her children, no grandchildren, and we started to all communicate. And then it was like me and Mama Kitty had like a divine connection. And then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I was invited to her home during a time where she had a lot of family present. And the hospitality was beautiful and welcoming. And I've actually popped up another time before, and I guess that Gullah root of hospitality, compassion, and just being helpful. She opened up her home again to me. Now this time I was here as we was going to the museum, the Gullah-N-Geechie Museum. I didn't expect to see Mama Kitty on this particular trip. But the amazing thing is when I went there and you talked to Miss, was his name Mr. Hodges?
Dr. Hodges.
Yeah,
Doc,
you said
Dr. Hodges.
okay, yeah, Dr. Hodges, and I was looking at the beautiful artifacts and the artistry and the culture and the everything that he had inside there. And then, of course, I'm there to try to do an interview with him on the spot. And then he referred me to someone else. And then I said, well, no, he brought to my attention you can take a tour while you're here. And I say, yeah, well, where do I sign up? I'm thinking I'm getting ready signed up right in there. And he mentions Gullah-N-Geechie Mahn tours. And I said, that sounds familiar. And he said something else. And then I heard the word kitty. And I said, are you talking about Mama Kitty? And he said, "Well, yeah, I believe it. She's got a tour guide place up the street." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I actually know her." And lo and behold, this is where hospitality is again. So I've been with her for the past few days, and so it's amazing how the divine spirit opens doors that no one can close, and closing where no one can open in order to make things happen, because it is the time of enlightenment and empowerment, but it's based on the knowledge that we have. And because of an African rooted culture, there's always, even if the name is different, Sankofa allows you to look backwards in order to move forward. And so when we go to now awakening and this divine paradigm shift of reclaiming our culture, where we actually have strength and power um, through our spirituality, our religion. And it's not about trying to figure out who belongs to this, that, and the other. Because if you have any type of spirituality or religion, if it's about compassion and unity, then that's supposed to be the type of work we're supposed to be able to utilize, whatever the changes are, that we be a representation of that particular being able to unite in spite of the differences, because most of it was created to create division. And the enemy knows if you can create different type of perspectives, it will continue to have people um well ununited. So we have to realize the one thing we have in common, in spite of religion, complexion, and status and this, that, and the other, that we are a target among a system that has an intention of depopulating us. So we have to bring what we have in common together and recognize each other's gifts and our strengths and our powers and be able to be that one body that have different members but respect and honor and support each other's position so we can actually get some things done. And because of this matriarchal, matrilineal shift of reclaiming the wisdom of the divine feminine, the woman, it is very significant in such a time as this that the divine feminine come together and take back their position of being that first creator, that first nurturer, that first counselor, that first healer, and just being that extension wherever there's chaos, that we have the power and the authority and the ability that is given to us from above and below and within in order to bring things back in balance and back in harmony with nature, the spirits of the earth, and the divine, as it is the masculine and the feminine energies. So the divine spirit is moving in various different forms. And it's a blessing to be able to recognize a culture that is still among us, that recognize the power and the foundation of the divine feminine, and that we can actually get some things done. And may the divine continue to bless Mama Kitty and her organization, her tour organization, anything she sets her hand to in order to continue to empower with the roots of the truth that can it can bear fruit, that we be able to be benefit from the labor that she has put forth and continue to do so. So at this time, I would like her to talk a little bit more about her Gullah and Geechee Mahn tour, and then we're gonna try to post the information in the chat, and then we will also, at the end of the program, when we upload it again, we'll have her contact information so the audience can actually reach out to her. But yeah, if you can just shine some more light on your actual business and what else you do in the community. And with that, for now, I'm complete.
Okay, I'm Gullah-N-Geechie Mind Tours. We are actually the oldest Gullah tour in the state of South Carolina, and didn't plan on doing a tour. Started with pushing my daughter into food source. My youngest daughter is a chef, and we thought we'd focus on low country food or African based food. And it became extremely successful. We were written up in just about every kind of book and newspapers, and this became a destination place without our planning that. We were just trying to do something for our children. And I began to pick people up at train stations, bus stations, airlines, wanting to come and dine at the Gullah House restaurant over 30 years ago. And my husband looked at me one day and he says, "Babe, you're doing an awful lot of this. Why don't you start a tour company?" And that's how it was birthed. We began to go into many of the archives in different places up and down the coast, doing oral research, because for me it was important to hear the voices of the stakeholders, and that was the elders. And in doing so, you found and looked at the diversity of Gullah, that it wasn't just the experiences on St. Helena, that there's, even though people were birthed from Africans, that their stories were different, but there's this thread that connected them all that came from the continent. And then in doing so, when we look at our researches of where we come from and all that, it gives you a sense of self, of yourself and who you're to be. And that was a birthing, a rebirth, I think, for me as I began to do this. Met scholars all over the world, in and out of the continent in South America, and looking at the imprint of the movement of Africans, even in the midst of an atrocity, that human slavery that was given to us as a people. And what I found was that I could celebrate my ancestry, that I could promote it to my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, that it didn't matter what was being taught, which was not the truth of the imprint of Africa and how we're great in our diversity as people. And I just found a way to celebrate me as a woman, the history. We invite everyone here. The one thing that's important as we look at this critical race theory is that in order for the nation to be healed, truth has to be told so that people can rise above. I'm going to use one of them terms that we used to say years ago, rise above the dumb stuff so that they can be healed and people can know that there's very little difference between humanity, that God created us to thrive in the earth. And so we don't have to do all the crazy things to hold people back, because in holding, if I'm holding you, I'm not going anywhere and you not either. And so it gave me a freedom to be able to tell the truth. And so I even purposed that I could sing. I come from a singing family. My mom was a musician for over 70 something years. And she was still teaching music when she died at the age of 96. So I can do that. But I preface not to entertain people, but to give real history about the atrocities of slave trading and what it did to this nation. And unless we accept it, acknowledge it, and even for those who want reparation, until we deal with these issues, we will never be healed as a nation. And so we've got to rise. And what I do has added, I think, been an added benefit to economic development, because it's helped to bring more and more people into the area. I celebrate me, I celebrate my children, and I tell my children, my great grand, that they are the best of God's creation. And so we've just got to be healed as a nation. We don't have to be anything but what we are. And that's descendants from those people who departed into America, knowledge of everything, agriculture. We run around with that cell phone in our hands, and we're in space, and that took the minds of the Africans to get us to those places. We drive cars, and we can just go on and on with all the things that Africans of descent did. And so I celebrate today on this island and celebrate who we are. And it's an exciting time because I know God is in the plan. I've been a pastor too. So I'm beyond believing that God is. I know that He is, and that this too shall pass. We are going to be successful. We're going to prove who we are, and we're doing it now. We've got this new African American Supreme Court justice, and every day, every day, something new and good happens to us. So I'm so pleased to be on this show and to meet Baba Brown and Moshe, my girl. This is We just have to come together and be who we are designed to be in God's creation. I thank you again for just having this time to speak with you.
Well, I thank you. And I'm going to say goodbye. Good day to our audience. I want to thank you for staying with us. And Moshe is going to put up all the contacts and everything um, so that you'll be able to get in contact with us, with Mama Kitty, And go down and visit the Gullah-N-Geechie people. Let's let's stay together.
Baba,
Yes.
we have 5 minutes, and we should check and see if there's anybody in the chat room who might want to ask Mama Kitty a question.
Um, I'm not. For some reason, we got knocked off of this.
Oh, I can still see it.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So let me see if there's anybody in the chat asking the question. If you all have any questions, you can post it at now at this time. I'll okay. Let's see. So I'll highlight it. Do you see it in front of you, Mama Kitty?
Yes, the person is Nisa, 1971, is saying, good to know about Georgia Geechee. Uh, Geechee is diverse up and down the coast, and the experiences are going to be different. When we look at the history and the culture, you can determine the basic groups of people that enslaved Africans in parts of Georgia and Alabama, Mississippi. You had a lot of Europeans who had been incarcerated because of crimes in Europe. And so they began to, after they got out of those prison systems, they were some of your more harsh slaveholders. A lot of those Africans that came up out of those areas, you'd find them going up into the mountains of Kentucky and down across the Ohio River into Michigan, Illinois. A lot of the, and so you pick up different behaviors because Gullah is a merging culture. The influence in South Carolina is going to come from the Europeans who were second sons of the aristocrats and those people. If you look at different areas, you'll find different groups of Europeans that were in and out of these coastal regions. So we look at the Spanish, then we look at the French, and then we look at the English, and then they were back and forth capturing Africans out of the continent. So it's going to be diverse, and you can trace it from food source to religious practice. If you go down to Louisiana, you're going to find a lot of African Americans who are Anglican, and parts of New York, New Jersey that will be Anglican. If you come into South Carolina, places like that, once the Constitution is in place, a separation of church and state, then you'll see the conception of the Southern Baptist Church, and then the imprint of First African Baptist Church because of those people disconnecting. And so it's going to be varied, but I will tell you that as we look at Africanisms and Africans being in this area, just about every African American can trace one ancestor back to the state of South Carolina. So if you do your research, you most often find that to be so. Okay. But we're not monolithic. Did Gullah come
Well,
to Texas or Louisiana? Yes, it did. You'll find that we were everywhere. As a matter of fact, when we look at Africanisms, the Africans were in this continent 1,000 years prior to any Europeans being here. And so they have archival information. They just don't want to share that because uh, we're not to be the best of God's creation, which we are. I don't care where you go. You can even find information of Northern Africans here. If you look at some of the architecture, you see the imprint of the Moors. And so, we were all over the place, and we charted coming here by the stars, and in little boats. So we are a great people. My family is from Kingsland, Georgia. Some moved there from Tapvideo, okay, then to Atlanta, and then to Texas. There you go. We're all over the country. You've got South Carolinians who moved out of the South into various regions, and there's an imprint. My family, Carolina, on my mom's side, they followed one another over into Ohio, into the steel industry. And my dad's family out of Alabama, they went up into the mountains of Kentucky. And so I think there was a documentary on them not too long ago. So you can trace your ancestry based on that, but the imprint is going to be different based on whatever European culture influenced you. I can trace my ancestry back to England, to the monarchs. And so when we were sent an example of a coat of arms, couldn't figure out why when I was a little girl in Ohio, we had to come in at a certain time of day and wash up, change our clothes, sit and drink tea time. And that was because it was handed down from that piece, And I always thought it was kind of strange that nobody else had to come in and stop playing, but we did. We had to come in and get a book and read. So we're not monolithic, and there's all these influences that affect us as a people. And when you find that, it's a release in your spirit to know that you're special in that every little piece of your life matters to who you are and who you are to become.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moshe,
Okay. Yes. Just only, I'm thinking I'm looking at one more question or statement.
it's okay. Go ahead.
Oh,
My
okay.
grandmother from Lake Charles, and said someone is from Lake Charles. You're gonna find some similarity because of the Trail of Tears, how the Africans and Indians moved out of the Carolinas down to the bottom and all the way across. And so you're gonna hear some loan words from those same groups of people. I am sorry, I do not know Dr. Goodyear, but I do have some friends who have done out of Texas that were here doing archaeological digs in some of these plantations here on the island. The question is, how do we contact you? It's coming across the screen right now. Gullah-N-Geechie
Okay. So with that, we're complete. And Baba, you can close out as you feel free.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody again. It's actually been wonderful, spiritually, um, and in all the dimensions that we talk about. That we need to come together as a people and express and do more.
That's right.
Express it, do it, create the environment that produces what we know we need to be doing, what produces the children that we need to be raising, that produces the health and growing the foods that we need to be feeding ourselves and teaching
Yes.
ourselves. I mean, it's just so much that this kind of environment with uh, Mama Geechee, Mother Geechee, Mama Geechee, lays out to us, helps create that environment. So I'm hoping that we can talk to you again, uh, Mama Kitty, and and go further with this. So with that, we're going to tune off. And again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Peace.
Oh,